The fire breaks out during a party at a refugee camp in the Gaza Strip, killing at least 21 people. Hello, I'm Aline Saeed. This is Aljazeera live from Doha. Also coming up.
There was water in my eyes. Water in my eyes. And, well, it's unbelievable.
Justice for families whose loved ones died when a Malaysian airline flight was shot down over Ukraine.
The hours come for a new generation to lead the Democratic caucus that I so deeply respect.
Stepping down, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she will not seek re-election as Democratic leader. And as world leaders meet for the Asian-Pacific Economic Summit, protesters take to the streets of Bangkok. At least 21 people have been killed in Gaza after fire engulfed a residential building. 7 of the dead are children. Yumna El Saeed reports from the scene in Jabalia refugee camp.
What began as a family party, now described as a national tragedy. Flames tore through this home in the densely populated Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza Strip. Neighbors say they could hear screaming, but the fire was so intense they couldn't help those trapped inside.
I
was sleeping in the living room that looks out to my neighbors. I was asleep with my 5-year-old and I heard people screaming, so I woke up. Our brothers in the civil defense arrived, tried to enter the apartment but couldn't. They had no masks and no oxygen tanks, and the people burned inside, and until that moment, we still didn't go even 1 meter into the apartment.
The dead are all believed to be of the Abu Raya family. They were gathering to celebrate a birthday and welcoming home their father, who obtained a PhD overseas. But now, their home is just a wreck of charred walls and black suits.
There
was a large amount of fuel on location, which acted as a fire hazard. Teams of firefighters quickly rushed to the scene and the civil defense opened an immediate investigation.
The civil defense teams faced great difficulty in containing the enormous fire. A large number of fire brigade officers and Palestinian police rushed to the scene and had to use a lot of equipment to put out the flames and to prevent it from spreading to neighboring homes and areas.
Those who survived the blaze have been rushed to local hospitals. Israel maintains a blockade of Gaza, but says it will help those in need of medical treatment. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas says the victims will be remembered with a day of national mourning. Yumna Saeed, Aljazeera, Gaza.
3 men have been convicted for murder for their role in the downing of the Malaysian airline flight MH17 back in 2014. A court in the Netherlands sentenced them to life in prison in absentia. The plane was flying from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur when it was shot down over eastern Ukraine. All 298 people on board were killed. Steph Vassen reports from Schiphol.
Yeah, very good. Good to see you. How are you? Yeah, good to see you.
They traveled from all over the world to find answers 8 years after the lives of their loved ones ended abruptly in the sky over Ukraine. More than 10 different nationalities were on board Malaysian Airlines flight MH17. 196 of the 298 victims were Dutch. The plane departed from Schiphol to Kuala Lumpur when it was downed over a war zone in eastern Ukraine. The bodies of those on board and debris from the plane fell in a field near the village of Krabove. The court ruled that there was no doubt that the plane was shot down with an anti-aircraft Buk missile brought in from Russia and fired from a field controlled by pro-Russian separatists. 2 former Russian intelligence officers and 1 Ukrainian separatist commander are held responsible for transporting the missile.
En de rechtbank kwalificeert
de bewezen verklaarde feiten.
The court considered proven that the suspects conspired to purposefully and illegally bring down a plane knowing to cause mortal danger.
Anton Kotte lost his eldest son, daughter-in-law and 6-year-old grandson Remco, traveling to Bali for vacation. Remco's backpack was all that came home intact.
For us is it very important to show the world, to show the Russians, see what you have done. You've taken the life of a 6-year-old child. And now we are 8 years further on, and always I ask myself, what have they missed all these 8 years?
In the past 2.5 years, Kotte attended more than 65 court hearings, fulfilling a promise he made to his dead son to find the truth.
The judge stressed how immense the suffering of the relatives here has been for the past 8 years, with the bodies of their loved ones scattered in a field in eastern Ukraine, some for weeks. But even though those convicted have not attended the trial, they feel that justice has been done.
There was water in my eyes. Water in my eyes. And, well, it's unbelievable.
Law experts say the verdict was groundbreaking because for the first time a court ruled that Russia controlled, armed and financed the separatist rebels of the Donetsk People's Republic in eastern Ukraine.
This is a very important ruling. Even though this case was not about Russia, the court was very clear that it was about Russia. It was Russia that had overall control over the DPR forces. The book came from Russia, couldn't have been done without Russia knowing it.
Russia has always denied any involvement. The Russian Foreign Ministry has called the verdict scandalous, saying that throughout the trial the court was under unprecedented pressure to impose a politically motivated outcome. Prosecutors and the 3 convicted men have 2 weeks to decide to appeal the verdict. Stepfasen, Aljazeera, Schiphol.
Hans de Bosch lost his 17-year-old daughter on the flight.
I'm so satisfied of today. It was a long day, a long 8 years, but after so many time, the truth has finally been spoken out by an independent judge. I'm so glad, really. When you look at it now, the world was quite naive at the moment because MH17 was shot down and a Dutch investigation team investigated a lot all those years. The Crimea was annexed by Russia and the world did nothing. And now 8 years later, there's a real war and the dictator becomes bigger and bigger and the aggression becomes more and more. And now the world has opened its eyes. So we can say we were naive at the time. For the country, it was, like some people said, it was our own 9/11 because 200 people were killed in a small country with 60 million inhabitants. And everyone knew someone or had a friend whose daughter died, etc. So it was not only impact for the next of kin like me, but also for school members, sports colleagues. So it was a huge impact, I can say, for the whole country. Everyone knew where he was on July 17, 2014. And finally, after 8 years waiting, the truth has come open. So I'm very satisfied today and I can sleep well tonight.
South Korea says Pyongyang has fired what's thought to be an intercontinental ballistic missile off the east coast. Japan confirmed the weapon landed in its exclusive economic zone, roughly 210 kilometers from an island in North Hokkaido. It is the latest in a series of launches which Tokyo says are taking place with unprecedented frequency. US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is stepping down as Democratic leader. She says she won't seek re-election. She served as the top House Democrat for 2 decades. Shian Britansi reports from Capitol Hill.
The Democrats will lose control of the House of Representatives in January, but the party was in jubilant mood as it convened in the chamber on Thursday.
The House will be in order.
After days of speculation, Nancy Pelosi, the first female Speaker of the House, confirmed that she will be stepping down from her leadership position in the party, a position she's held since 2003.
And with great confidence in our caucus, I will not seek re-election to Democratic leadership in the next Congress. For me, the hour's come for a new generation to lead the Democratic caucus that I so deeply respect. And I'm grateful that so many are ready and willing to shoulder this awesome responsibility.
She was received rapturously by her caucus, a show of unity in stark contrast to a Republican Party in turmoil after a poor showing in the midterms. They may have won the House, but their majority is very narrow. The Republican Party establishment blames the Donald Trump wing of the party for the midterm election results, but the Trump wing of the party blames the Republican Party establishment for not being bold enough in going after the Biden administration. With their majority in the House, the Republicans can launch congressional investigations into the Biden administration. Already they say they will be looking into Joe Biden's son, Hunter's business dealings, and allegations of corruption involving the president.
This is an investigation of Joe Biden, the President of the United States, and why he lied to the American people about his knowledge and participation in his family's international business schemes. National security interests require the committee conduct investigation, and we will pursue all avenues that have long been ignored.
But the current Republican leadership is wrestling with how far it should go to appease the Trump wing of the party without alienating swing voters ahead of the next elections in 2024. Shihab Ratansi, Aljazeera, Washington.
The US says its military base in northeast Syria has been targeted with missiles. The attack on the Green Village base happened on Thursday night. The US says no one was injured and the base wasn't damaged. It's not yet known who fired the rockets. The White House says Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman should have immunity in relation to the killing of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. It's a reversal of President Joe Biden's campaign rhetoric denouncing the brutal murder. Khashoggi's fiancée has filed a lawsuit over the killing of the Washington Post columnist in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in 2018. The request by the Department of Justice for immunity for MBS will ultimately be decided by a judge. Ukraine says Russia has targeted critical energy facilities across several cities in a new wave of missile strikes. At least 2 people were killed. But there was a glimmer of hope as the deal to ensure shipments of Ukrainian grain was extended. Jonah Hull has more from Kyiv.
This was the moment a relatively calm morning in the city of Dnipro turned into a rude reminder of the horrors of war. The government said energy infrastructure, including gas storage facilities, were once again struck, but as ever, civilians in residential districts in Dnipro and Odessa became collateral damage.
Thank God 2 walls saved us. We were left with no windows, no glass left intact. There is a huge mess in the apartment.
There were overnight attacks too, this the aftermath of missile strikes in the south-central city of Zaporizhia, where local officials said there were several dead.
It is the second time the city has been hit. There is nothing else left to do. This is how we are surviving here, living our lives.
Thursday's attacks saw the efficient use of Ukrainian air defense systems. This video shows the interception of at least 1 incoming missile in the Kyiv region. In all, Ukraine's military command says 10 missiles and 5 drones were shot down, preventing untold additional destruction in what was the second Russian aerial bombardment in a week, the 6th since October. With emergency blackouts in place across the country and the national grid describing the situation as critical, President Zelensky said 10 million Ukrainians were without power on Thursday afternoon. That's grim news indeed, as the first snows of winter have fallen, the temperature plummeting below 0 degrees. There was a glimmer of good news, the extension for a further 4 months of a deal allowing the export of Ukrainian grain via its Black Sea ports.
I was deeply moved to know that in Istanbul, Turkey, Ukraine, Russia and the UN had come to an agreement for the rollover of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, allowing for the free exports of Ukrainian grains.
The 4-nation deal brokered by Turkey was hailed by President Erdogan as a benefit to the world's food supply and security. Jonah Hull, Al Jazeera, Kyiv.
Protests have been taking place in Bangkok as world leaders gather for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. Tens of thousands of riot police have been deployed across the city and have confronted the crowds. Demonstrators are demanding that the Prime Minister step down and they want political prisoners released. Let's go straight to Tony Cheng, who's at the protest in Bangkok. Tony, what's going on?
Things are relatively quiet at the moment, but about an hour ago, when the protesters started to march, where they've been camped for the last 24 hours, a little bit down the road, there were some pretty violent clashes. Rubber bullets were fired by the police, but the police have quite effectively trapped them in this side street. Behind me, I don't know if you can see that well, but they've got barricades across the street, about 6 rows of pretty heavily armed riot police, ordinary cops in brown as well. There are lots of reserves waiting here. Just behind us, there are 2 water cannons. So it's going to be very hard for the protesters to push through. The Thai government has brought 30,000 extra police into Bangkok to lock it down over this APEC summit. And in other parts of the city, you can see them dotted 1 every 10 meters along the streets. There are SWAT teams with shotguns, all sorts of security measures deployed because they're very concerned about this type of thing breaking out. We've seen these protesters trying to come out onto the streets to make their point. They want the Prime Minister to step down. I think the government was very concerned that with so many international leaders and diplomats in Bangkok at the moment, this would this would be a very serious loss of face. Nonetheless, they have effectively trapped them here. Even if they get through here, it would be very hard for them to get all the way to the conference centre, which is another 15 kilometres away from here. We've seen all sorts of barricades in place, other reserves of police. The APEC summit itself got underway at about 9 o'clock local time. It all seems to be going according to plan. I think the hope is that with the international spotlight away from the war in Ukraine, which is very much the top summit on the top topic on the agenda at the G20 and to a certain extent the ASEAN summit before it, that the leaders who are here in Bangkok at the moment will have a little bit more freedom and flexibility to discuss the economic issues. And in fact, that's one of the main things on the agenda today, dealing with what they're referring to as the looming recession. I think that's going to be a real concern for the global leaders. For the Thai government, it's going to be keeping these guys quiet. They seem to be doing it for the moment, but I think in the back of their minds, they'll be very aware of the time when they were holding an ASEAN summit in 2009. Protesters broke through and world leaders had to flee in helicopters.
Thank you for that. Tony Cheng there for us in Bangkok. Dominican Republic is building a border wall to stop the entry of undocumented migrants from neighbouring Haiti. It says it wants to prevent the smuggling of drugs and weapons. Teresa Bow reports from Dajabon in the Dominican Republic.
We're right here at the border between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. This bridge connects both countries, and you can see people from Haiti going to a market not far away to sell some of their belongings, while others are going back to Haiti, mostly carrying food and medicines and other things. There's a massive crisis in Haiti right now. Large parts of the country are controlled by armed gangs. This is causing fuel shortages, water shortages. It's making it difficult for humanitarian aid to be distributed. We're told that around 4 million people are struggling with hunger right now. And aside from that, there's also a cholera outbreak. Around 8,000 people have already been hospitalized because of a cholera outbreak that health authorities are saying they're not sure how they're going to control. So what's been going on in the Dominican Republic is that thousands of Haitians are being deported. We were in a military base not far away from here where hundreds of people were put into trucks and sent back to Haiti. Among those people, we saw pregnant women. We saw women whose children were born in the Dominican Republic who were saying that they shouldn't be deported and that should be allowed to stay at the Dominican Republic site. However, the United Nations is asking countries like the Dominican Republic to hold deportations of Haitians, to show empathy towards migrants, towards refugees who are escaping hunger, who are escaping violence, among many other things. The Dominican Republic, as you just saw, has been building a wall that is right here. Let me show you, it's right here, right across the border. You can see this river that divides both countries and has been building the wall that is going to make it much more difficult for Haitians to cross into the DR side. But what human rights groups are saying is that walls such as this one could force people who are fleeing violence and hunger, among many other things, to take greater risk to try to escape the situation in Haiti right now.
Twitter is closing its offices until November the 21st amid reports hundreds of employees have quit. The new boss, Elon Musk, had given staff the option of signing up to a new hardcore Twitter or leave with 3 months' pay. The deadline to decide passed several hours ago. A disabled employee was fired for refusing to return to office, is suing. Twitter is facing legal action for previous layoffs. Ian Sher is editor-at-large with CNET. He suspects Twitter staff are choosing to leave the company because of Musk's management style.
He is known for being a very hard-charging CEO who has extreme demands of his employees, right? We've seen him talk about sleeping on the floor of the Tesla plants. We saw after he took over Twitter that some of the people inside Twitter were bringing in their sleeping bags and having to stay overnight there. And we know that he was pushing them very hard. What I think is interesting is that this was one of the first times that he let the employees tell him what they think of all of this. And that was by him saying, either you're going to sign up and say you're going to follow along with this minimum 40-hour work week I expect you in the office, or you can walk out the door. And it seems, according to a lot of reports, that a lot of people took the door. It's very clear, I think, that Elon Musk realizes maybe that he doesn't have very many friends in the office right now, which, you know, it's hard to have a lot of friends when you've cut half the staff and then tried to kind of get a bunch of more people to go by telling them that they're doing a terrible job and you know, just kind of generally causing a lot of stress. So I think the question is, where is this all going to go, right? Is Twitter suddenly going to be significantly smaller than it started? I mean, just earlier this month, it was 7,500 employees. Then it went down to some 3,500. According to some reports, it has dropped down by 88%. That's an unbelievable number of people to walk out the door inside a month.
The new boss of the failed cryptocurrency exchange, FTX, says the company used customer funds to buy employees' homes in the Bahamas. FTX filed for bankruptcy last week. Its founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, resigned as chief executive. The new CEO, John Ray III, led the liquidation of the energy company Enron. He describes the collapse of FTX as a complete failure of corporate control. The United Nations is celebrating the 50th anniversary of its World Heritage Sites programme. UNESCO's convention was designed to help protect cultural properties. An international conference is underway in Greece, and there's been an announcement on a future focus on smaller African countries. They will be encouraged to apply for protection and funding for their unique sites. John Zaropoulos has more from Delphi.
In ancient times, this remote place on Mount Parnassus in central Greece became the most important oracle. This is where city-states would send emissaries to find out what they should do when they were faced with difficult decisions, such as whether to wage war. It is here that the Athenians sent heralds to ask whether they should fight the Persians at what later became their triumphs at the battles of Marathon and Salamis in the 5th century BC. The Pythia, the priestess who lived in the Temple of Apollo behind me, would become ecstatic by breathing in burnt laurel leaves, and she would utter various phrases that priests would later interpret and write down for those emissaries. And here also the people of Delphi lived, attending the theatre above us and attending the Delphic Games, which were as famous in antiquity as the Olympic Games that took place every 4 years. For all of these reasons, the UNESCO organization has named Delphi one of its key World Heritage Sites, and it chose this place to announce on Thursday that it was also trying to broaden in the next phase of its history the mixture of sites to include more African sites among the World Heritage list. So it is going to invite 12 countries among the smaller and less wealthy African countries to go through the application process and gradually by 2030 list at least a dozen of their sites in the World Heritage List, which already numbers almost 1,200 sites worldwide.
Scientists in the northeast of Spain have unearthed a fossil of a sea turtle the size of a car. It's Europe's biggest known turtle. This species weighs just under 2 tons. Researchers believe that it lived roughly 70 million years ago.
This is Leviathanochelys enigmatica. It's a big marine turtle, about 3.7 meters of diameter. And it's very interesting because now we know more about the ancient seas. We are talking about 83 million years ago.